Hey there. You're listening to True Story No Cap. Real stories, no exaggeration, no lies. Just the raw, unfiltered moments life throws our way. Relax, lean back, and let's get started. Sarah rushed through the rooms, hastily gathering the things that came to hand. Her breath was ragged and she was extremely nervous from the tension. Just now, her supervisor from the medical institution had called, asking about the reasons for her sudden departure. Of course, they let her go immediately, but questions poured in from all sides, and she couldn't explain anything. And anyway, she didn't want to talk to anyone about what was happening. Sarah had met her husband when she was doing her internship at one of the clinics. Feelings arose suddenly and were so strong that they didn't resist and got married. After she started working in the outpatient clinic, they decided to wait on having children. She was just getting settled in the new place, and then somehow it became less of a priority, although she did hint to her husband about her desire to have a child. Sarah sank into painful memories, and tears of obita and bitter anger immediately welled up in her eyes. All of this had happened because of Emily, whom she had considered her close friend. The day before, she had learned that Emily was not a true friend at all. She moonlighted at the clinic, staying for night shifts. Yesterday, she was supposed to spend the day there, but her shift was canceled. Pleased with this opportunity, she hurried home to arrange a surprise for her husband. But when she quietly entered the apartment, she heard a woman's laughter. "You surprise me every time. I really don't know what you'll prepare next." It was Emily's voice, and her husband answered her, "You know, you always motivate me. I think about you every minute. I want you to be happy." He continued to speak words full of passion and devotion, calling her his cosmos and promising to do anything for her smile and kiss. Sarah slowly retreated to the front door. She had heard enough to understand the terrible truth. Sounds of kissing came from the room, and she didn't want to see what was happening there. She quietly left the apartment, leaving the door unlocked. That night she spent at the medical institution, unable to close her eyes from the shock. Now she had only returned to gather her things and disappear, and during the night she had already figured out exactly where she would go. She had inherited a small house in the countryside from her grandmother. None of her current acquaintances knew about it, because many years ago she had left there to live with her father in another large town, after her mother passed away. Only when her grandmother died did she come for the funeral and learn that the house was left to her. It was a perfectly livable little house, which had been empty since then. She decided to go there, to this secluded settlement. All that remained was to pack the essentials: clothes, documents. No one would find her there, and she didn't want either her husband or her former friend to know her whereabouts. Let them think she was missing or that something had happened to her. "My soul is no more," the girl whispered softly, feeling devastated. An hour later, everything necessary was packed. She stood in the middle of the room, slowly surveying the familiar surroundings. Inside, there was a clear feeling that she would never return to this place. Here she had been happy, and here she had learned of the betrayal by the two people closest to her. This place had ceased to be her quiet haven, turning into a dirty swamp where disgusting deeds had been committed. Sarah felt nauseous and hurried to leave the apartment, to go nowhere. 2 days later, she was already in the rural settlement. Before getting on the transport, she got rid of her old SIM card and bought a new one. She didn't want to be bothered by calls from her ex-husband Emily or anyone else. If necessary, she would contact the medical institution herself to inform them of her further plans regarding work. But as she traveled, the thought increasingly bothered her. Should she give up her medical career altogether? The actions of those close to her had knocked the ground out from under her feet, and she didn't know how to live on. She only understood that she wanted to radically change her way of life to recover and heal her emotional wounds. Now she was trudging along a country road with a suitcase. She had reached the settlement by bus, but there was still a long way to go to her grandmother's house. A local resident gave her a ride in his car, but only to the right turn. Now she was walking the rest of the way home. When she finally arrived, her heart immediately felt lighter. Before her stood her grandmother's little house, which now belonged to her. Here she could hide and no one else could hurt her. She opened the creaky gate and entered the yard. Sarah stood for a minute, then slowly closed the gate behind her, leaving behind all her sorrows and anxieties. She stepped towards a new, but as yet unknown life. 2 weeks later, Sarah slowly began to recover. During this time, she met her neighbors, who turned out to be very kind and responsive people. They helped her settle in, found workers who quickly put the house in order. The furniture in the house turned out to be quite decent, and the yard was also quickly cleaned up. She even started smiling, unable to react differently to the selfless kindness of strangers. They didn't know her at all, she was a stranger to them, but in 2 weeks they had done more for her than she could have expected. Her wounded heart was shedding tears, but the wounds were quickly healing from such gentle and attentive treatment. And then something happened that made her realize that she wouldn't be able to hide her profession. She wanted to give it up, just become something like a farm worker or a milkmaid. She didn't know what else one could do in the countryside, but she intended to find out. But she didn't get the chance. In the morning, Mrs. Gable, who had helped her the most with the house, ran over. The woman was agitated and began speaking quickly. "Good morning. Forgive me, dear, but I won't be able to help you today. I urgently need to go to the large town." She explained that her granddaughter was very sick. Her stomach had hurt for several days, and during the night she had gotten much worse. She was constantly vomiting and couldn't even drink. Mrs. Gable was very worried because there was no doctor in their settlement. Since the last one left, a new one had not been sent. She didn't even know whom to turn to for help, and was terribly worried about her granddaughter, who lay pale, breathing heavily, and had wild eyes. Sarah said anxiously, "She's dehydrated. She needs an IV drip urgently." She added that the girl had probably eaten something bad, but it was necessary to quickly remove the toxins from her body. Mrs. Gable threw up her hands. "You're talking such words. Where would we get an IV drip here in our settlement? And even if we did, nobody knows how to use it." She lamented that the villagers couldn't even give a simple injection, let alone an IV drip. Mrs. Gable decided she would take her granddaughter to the large town, where her precious child would be treated. Sarah immediately ran into the house for her medical bag. She had everything she needed. She had taken it just in case, although she didn't intend to use it in this place. She quickly set up an IV drip for the girl, and she immediately felt better. She was able to drink water, and by evening she looked quite well. The trip to the large town was canceled, and Mrs. Gable was ready to kiss her hands in gratitude. The next day, the whole district already knew that Sarah was a doctor. She hadn't managed to hide her profession, and she realized that when the girl got better, she felt immense joy. She felt that only medical work brought her such deep satisfaction that nothing else could provide. And a month later, she was already working at the local medical post, which had been empty for a long time. None of the doctors wanted to waste their lives sitting in a rural settlement, but for her, it was exactly what she needed, to hide from her past life and be useful to kind and responsive people. Several months passed, and Sarah came to a call for a little girl who had had a high fever for a long time. She was met by David, a man with a pleasant appearance. "Hello, you don't know me yet, but I've heard quite a bit about you," he said. Introducing himself, he asked her to help his daughter. Sarah only glanced at the man, noting his beautiful eyes, but immediately dismissed extraneous thoughts. That's all she needed. She had certainly been without male attention for too long, but not to the extent that a single glance at beautiful eyes would drive her crazy. "Lead me to her, I'll examine the girl," she said in a businesslike tone. 10 minutes later, she was writing out prescriptions on a piece of paper. "She has some bad wheezing," she explained. "I'll write down the name of the medicine for you now. You'll need to go to the large town to buy it and a couple of other medications." She offered to call his wife to tell her how to properly treat the little one, promising to share a couple of secrets so the girl would recover quickly. A silence hung in the air, and Sarah looked at the man with bewilderment. He was looking at her, frowning. After a minute, he said, "I don't have a wife. I'm raising my daughter myself." He fell silent, swallowing a lump in his throat, and added that his wife had died in childbirth. Sarah immediately looked at the blonde angel lying in bed. Her blue eyes looked at her so trustingly. Sarah felt her heart clench in her chest with pain. How unfair life was. She had asked her husband for a child, but he didn't want one, probably because he was already having an affair with Emily, and she had dreamed of a child so much, and now before her lay a girl who had never known a mother's affection. It was unbearably painful to encounter such injustice in life. Sarah looked at the man again, and she felt an unfamiliar feeling stirring in her heart. Perhaps sympathy, perhaps anxiety, perhaps a deep understanding of his pain, and she almost drowned in his eyes, which were looking at her so intently. "You know, I'll come every day then," she said. "I'll do everything necessary myself. You just buy the medicine, and I'll make sure your princess is back on her feet quickly." She stroked the girl's head and she smiled sweetly at her. David also smiled, and Sarah noticed how much the father and daughter resembled each other. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "How about I come pick you up every evening so you don't have to walk here yourself?" Sarah wanted to refuse such kindness, but immediately changed her mind. It had been so long since she had talked to a man, and this man was so pleasant, polite, and his daughter was such a sweetheart. What could go wrong if he came to pick her up? She could ask him about the girl. She simply wanted to talk to someone other than patients and neighbors. "Okay, I'll give you the address then, where I know where you live," the man interrupted her and immediately fell silent. Sarah looked at him and saw something in his eyes that confused her. A handsome man, but she had already had one like that in her life who had trampled her heart. She already regretted agreeing to him picking her up, but there was no turning back, as she had offered it herself. Time passed, and one day Sarah was sitting on a bench in front of the house enjoying fragrant tea. Strong male arms hugged her from behind, followed by a gentle kiss on the cheek. Sarah closed her eyes and smiled with happiness. "My love, do you have the day off today? You are mine and only mine," David whispered in her ear. Sarah didn't have time to answer before the girl jumped off the steps with a squeal. David sighed with a smile. "Rather, you could say she's not mine, but ours." Sarah smiled, recalling the events of the past year. It had been the most wonderful time in her life because she had met true love. David had melted her heart, and it turned out that he had seen her long before she saw him and had fallen in love at first sight. His daughter's illness had brought them together. And it had also been a difficult time because she had had to face her past. For the sake of David and his daughter, she decided to put a definitive end to her previous relationships and went back to where she had left her husband and former friend. It turned out they hadn't really looked for her. They were already living together. Signing all the documents was just a formality that had to be observed, and it all went quickly. While Sarah was sorting out her affairs, Emily wanted to talk to her, but Sarah didn't utter a word. Her ex-husband didn't even try to justify himself, merely saying that life is unpredictable. That was the last time she saw them, and now nothing connected her to her past life anymore. She could fully dedicate herself to the man she loved, whom she had met thanks to her grandmother's little house. She sighed, releasing the remnants of unpleasant memories. She stroked David's hand. "We still have so much time. I'll have plenty of time to bore you," she said. "You are my life. I love you, and you will never bore me," David replied, holding her tightly in his arms.